Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. Could humanhood become a lost technology? And hopefully the audio is adjusted that, people can hear the background volume, background music properly. There's a bunch of things, I made notes before this episode, but I'm going to I'm just going to go with the flow and just share the vision. Could humanhood become a lost technology? And really, what is the value of our eyes? It's strange that to be a human being is not that you're already being human, but it's like we're being it unconsciously. What does that mean? That means we're not fully conscious how our existence is being experienced. In philosophy, there's this concept, and just you can say philosophy and psychology in a bridge between both of them. We have the idea of nature versus nurture. And there's also the 7, we can say, major psychological models for human psychology. So I'll explain these two, and I'll attempt to keep bringing the idea of the title into more of the more towards the center of the what I'm going to speak about here. So first of all, every person who speaks, they're seeing something. Ultimately, we're looking at a creature in a world, and we're trying to comprehend its behavior. The effort of psychology is to understand how behavior comes to happen. And there's multiple ways we can perceive it, but the main starting point is that a player in a video game, and we're trying to understand what is allowing this player to be a player, and how it's even being a player, and what greater realities are there. Now, when I say could humanhood become a lost technology, the idea of a lost technology, you can think of it, for example, the concept of flight. The Wright brothers who came up with the airplane, right, with the plane, a prototype. So what was the idea there? The idea was that when the Wright brothers managed to become successful, at that time there were so many other people also attempting and trying to design technologies for flight. But the moment the plane was successful, the moment there was one technology that was successful, everybody forgot the other technologies and just went towards that. Do you know? Think of it this way, that in all these years that the human species has been progressing, There has been a selection process, not just natural selection in regards to the biological entity, but there has been a selection in regards to what sort of intelligence do we want to access as a species. Now, an example could be that a person back in the day used to go for a walk to go see their neighbor and then to have a conversation that way, right? But when the telephone was made, it was as if a lot of walking was reduced. It's as if a technology came and replaced the previous method of approach we had. I mean, that's just an example, I'm saying. But in many cases, that's really reality, And if we treat ideologies, as a sort of tool, some people believe in ideologies. The ideology becomes their main source of life, even who they are as an ideology. But there's some people who see language and ideology, I'm one of those people, as a technology. When I'm giving a talk, when I'm speaking and communicating, I feel more like I'm entering an Iron Man suit of conception and then communicating through that, or with the permission of that ideology, with the geometry of that ideology. Let's say geometrical authorization of that ideology, So, the human creature is this creature that it wants to stick around in the world, and it's using what it has access to, different technologies to get by. Lost technologies is the idea that something gets forgotten because something else is found. It's another way of saying it's a reality exchange, right? Now, when I say could humanhood become a lost technology, I am like that futurist who's like, okay, let's go into the future, far, far future. At what point will the psychology of this biological entity choose to experience life beyond what the biology permits itself? That means if we, for example, imagine in the future, let's give it a couple hundred years, right? People start replacing their body parts. Right, so imagine somebody is a construction worker and they're like, yo, why do I have biological hands? I'm just gonna get robotic hands. And the idea is, just like there's the concept of a tattoo addiction, somebody who gets one tattoo but then notices all the other space in their body and wants to fill it, right? Simply, we can say it becomes a sort of replacing what is natural for the unnatural sort of addiction, right? So I'm envisioning, could there be a future where all human beings, because of their desire for psychological immortality, they replace all their biological body parts, where at some point we're either hilariously sort of Neo brain in the vat, or we're in some sense kind of like everything is gone, and somehow consciousness, let's say from a Descartesian mind-body dualism, interdimensionally can be accessible to, what do you call it, through technology. So what I'm saying is, if in the future everybody's replaced their body parts, biological body parts, and it's kind of like, if we see a future where it's like robots with human psychology, like everybody's robotic but they're behaving like humans, like a natural entity, right? There may come a time where we choose to no longer be human, and so the idea of human could actually be a very unique phase in history, right? We don't know the destiny of this evolutionary animal that in 2022 is looking at a computer screen. We don't know how far consciousness will, it's poetically, it's like, it's like, first, this is nature. Nature is when the machine is in the spirit, But the unnatural or technology is when the spirit is going into the machine. Right now, even though our minds are not an object, but the mind is journeying into the machine. We are pre that phase by a couple hundred years, right? So when I say, could humanhood become a lost technology if we stop behaving psychologically as human beings? If we stop being biologically human beings, there could be a consideration of this, that we forgot how to be human when technology gave us an access to be a different sort of an interdimensional being, right? Now, there's something that, I'm gonna explain to the viewers, right? I mean, of course, let me get into nature and nurture, and then I'll get to the 7 major psychological models, okay? Nature versus nurture is an idea which is pretty much saying, is the behavior of the creature influenced by what it is genetically, right? Or is it based on what else in life happens? So when a child is born, we have this view of a natural entity, right? But the personality of the child is born, and let's say the child becomes 11, 12, and that's, what is it? Some psychologists like Jacques Lacan, I believe, they were like, okay, at the age 11, 12, the child is to itself becoming a psychological individual. It's becoming it's like a self-recognition, right? The identity is being established slowly, being fixed. The child is born, let's say, as a natural entity, but what it experiences throughout life is the idea of how it's being nurtured, right? That's the remarkable thing about what we are as beings. We are in a dynamic, growing world. By the nature of being in a changing world, our attention is shifting through environments. Behind our eyes, our attention actually shifts through way more environments and modes of reality than in front of our eyes. But anyways, I'll get to that later. So the main point about nature versus nurture, there was something I'd actually looked up for me. I'm gonna read this for viewers. Okay. So nature is what people think of as pre-wiring and is influenced by genetic inheritance and other biological factors. Nurture is generally taken as the influence of external factors after conception. Example, the product of exposure, experience, and learning of an individual. So this might be a cool way of saying this. When thinking about nature and nurture, we're looking at this human being and we're like, okay, what forces, let's say forces are moving its mind, right? And think of it this way, before a person learns anything, they're still alive, they're still a natural being, right? There's some sort of intelligence there, but think of it this way, that there is a force moving the individual from internally, and then there are forces externally, right? And think of it this way, that there's an inner world and an outer world. An inner world and an outer world. And think of it this way, that there are forces from within you and outside of you that are trying to sculpt or suggest what sort of entity of identification is present in the moment. culture, society, civilization, these go in the domain of nurture. It is what outside of you influences you and what is from inside of you influencing you. In let's say, simply said, for in the domain of psychology, what is inside of you influencing you is considered as your genetics, right? What you are, what your the design. It's like what your DNA gifts you. I'll give you an example. For example, I'm a twin. I have a twin brother, and when we were young, we looked really like each other, right? But our personalities, even though there being a genetical similarity, but our personalities, we became completely two different people with different behaviors and different attitudes, right? So that's in some sense saying we were genetically similar as natural entities, but the way the world nurtured our nature, we became separate, different people. Different people's different minds. That means the genetic potential got sculpted differently in regards to how each one of us, in some sense, experienced life. Now I'm going to find this infographic and then explain to people. When I say models, I'm talking about perspectives of approach. Hang on, guys, I'm just trying to find the thing. Okay, so I found a picture, guys. This is going to be important. There we go. So let me see how I can explain this. Think of it this way. think of it this way, that when we look at a human being, let's say a human being's behavior, any human being, but let's say we look at a human behavior, there is 7 angles, there's 7 ways where we could look at the moment and to try to interpret the behavior we're seeing. Okay. So we have the psychodynamic view. So this started with Freud. It brought forth the psychoanalysts. Pretty much people were wondering, okay, what unconscious factors of the human mind are influencing the behavior of the individual. That means it could be childhood memories, it could be in some sense things from dreams left in your unconscious, so various things. For example, an example would be, let's say somebody getting angry at someone, right? Or let's say a vase breaking and somebody getting angry. It's as if, like, where does that anger come from? Where did that force arise in them that led to that behavior, right? And in some sense, the major point is that it's how the unconscious has a relationship to the behavior of the individual. Okay, so that's the psychodynamic view. To the behavioral view, the behaviorists were, think of it this way, they were people that they were like, okay, we don't want to just consider that there's, the influence of human behavior is just from, like, the unconscious or something. So the behaviorists are kind of like the, secular people. How should I say it? It's as if the behavior of the individual is based on all observable factors, what it goes through, how it learns in life, So it has to do with more like how nurture is influencing the nature, rather than there being an unconscious view on how, something beyond the nature and nurture is influencing the nature. The behaviorists wanted to pretty much see what measurable, in what sort of external to the entity measurable influence affects the psyche, affects the behavior. So the behaviorist is more fascinated with the observable universe and its influence on the individual's added behavior, right? And like, think about it, Freud, the psychoanalyst being like, could it be because could this person's behavior be due to a past moment where they were repressed, or there was something deep hidden with them, or a way, a value system arose to their psyche that it's like they're not conscious of. The humanistic view, an example of a person from that field would be Maslow. And so the idea of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's constantly pointing to the idea of the free will, self-actualization, and a sort of positive view on reality. So in some sense, what out of the free will of the individual it's like based on the capability of the individual. Maslow, from a sociological perspective, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's as if a being physically survives. Let me show it to you. a person, let's say, cultivates or finds air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, reproduction. Physically, it's all good. Safety needs, personal security, employment, resources, health, property, love and pretty much shelter, love and belonging. Sorry, not shelter, in the sense of the person feeling safe, not in just the world, but in also the society they're living in the world. Beyond that, the person is seeking love and belonging, friendship, intimacy, family, sense of connection. After you have all these three levels, you are like, I gotta get some respect, and then self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, freedom. And then finally, the desire to become the most that one can be, self-actualization. Self-actualization, all of this, man's survival in the world is not just dependent on what he is genetically, it's not just dependent on outside factors, it's the choices that are made. So how is the free will choosing, right? I would say the humanistic value is the element of is the free will variable in the equation of what is influencing the behavior of the individual. Then from the humanistic we go to the cognitive, right? This has to do, I would say, it's as if think of it this way. Free will is an ability for the mind to engage, and cognition is how the mind engages. So what analysis is you see a moment. Imagine the child is born, it doesn't know any language, and it's just looking at the moment. It's like you ask the child what the world is. There is no answer for the child. The world is. It's the whole moment's just being, right? But when it comes to the concept of analysis, or a person actually wants to think, right? Even though I have my own philosophy on the word thinking, kind of not making sense, but what it is that it's the ability to engage with reality and the psychology of the human being. In order to process value, it separates itself, right? So think of it this way: we separated ourselves as a natural entity from the earth, and so we're like, okay, we're on the earth now, let's study the earth, let's analyze the earth. It's like there requires an initial separation, right? So in regards to the act of cognition, in regards to the act of thinking, we can see that the moment is divided between concept and context, right? And what children go to school for to learn is that the teacher is trying to ideologically, the teacher is trying to use images to explain a film, the reality of the direct experience of life, right? So our cognition is an attempt to, in some sense, clarify reality through how in the past we have journeyed through reality and segmented it, to be able to talk about something, one can't be it. People don't realize this. Because if you're being it, there is no anything else to talk about. You see, there is no observable dimension to the observed. The act of cognition is occurring, being more in some sense, how does a concept function into the context, and what is its behavior? I mean, honestly, here all these 7 perspectives in psychology, let's say models of sight. It's another way. There's a term for this. Biosocial-psychological, right? As if all of these, right, when it comes to, like, I'm saying these are, like, think of it this way: it's like one circle and there's 7 lines extending from it. I'm trying to tell the viewers, okay, these 7 lines, these 7 ways we can look at a singular moment's behavior, right? These are pretty much dimensions to the mind that have been recognized so far in regards to, let's say, psychological behavior. For example, if we see a human being, how would I say it? The cognitive perspective is the relationship of man with his inner reality and the content of his inner reality. Think of it this way. We look at something, we look at a person, and we're like, why did this person make this kind of decision? It has to do with that, with the act of their cognition, you know? And so it's as if, how did the person use their free will to give values to the concept and context of reality and then act in accordance to it? So that's the cognitive perspective. The biological perspective is very simple. It's think of it this way. It's the neurologist's cup of tea. Pretty much, how does the brain, that means if we're this natural being nurtured by the environment to become a sort of individual identity, right? So in some sense, what is happening in the brain? For example, if they have, I think there was a documentary on this on TV or something, but they were looking at like certain people who had committed heinous crimes, like savage crimes, and they realized that some of them had like brain damage or something, or what was it, the movie Joker, right? The guy was experiencing a very crazy reality, then anyways, he realizes there was something wrong with the natural component to the human being, the biological parts, right? So what is biologically influencing the individual? For example, there's a scholar called Terence McKenna. He was an advocate of the psychedelic movement and shamanism, which is a type of, you can say, spirituality, type of mysticism, esotericism on its own. But the idea was that it's as if the person, or think of it this way, the native shamans back in the day, they were like, yo, I'm gonna eat this plant and I'm gonna contact the gods or the spirit of nature, right? So for them, they were using they had a biological perspective that to some degree led them to experiencing a psychodynamic perspective, you know? So how is the biology of the individual influencing the behavior of the individual? The evolutionary perspective, so, you know, sometimes when I bite food, I feel like a tiger. When it comes to the idea of evolution, there is so many people better than me who can explain it. But the way I have accessed the idea is that, okay, this creature went through a journey before the child is just born. The child thinks it's simply just born and, yeah, I'm being me for the first time. But it's as if the journey of the genetics, right? What genetics is just like how in the Olympics they pass down the torch. It's kind of like something from this original gene, or I don't know how you perceive it, but like this something from the original still remains today. Something is journeying through the genetics. Okay, that means hilariously, survival is the spirit of the genetics, is the spirit of the DNA that's moving it, you know. Something wants to continue, right? And when it comes to what is happening on the surface of our planet and all creatures on the planet, like look at how bizarre it is. It's like the sunlight hit the earth on and off, and creatures from, let's say, the micro cells to, in some sense, think of it this way, creatures, the sunlight instructed genetics to seek immortality. The sunlight, was like how light is another way of saying light is why the world is moving to anything at all, or consciousness in the universe. Oh my god. Okay. Solar powered brains access reality. The genetical program that's occurring on the surface of the earth is inspired by light to continue. Okay, creature attained consciousness, creature experienced a level of reality which somehow innately knew it had to protect. You know, we're living in such an incredible world where there's stuff moving in it, and what really knowledge is trying to find what is motivating the movement of anything in the moment. You know, that means a psychologist, let's say a psychologist who wants to understand, you know, the mind of a potential universal being would become like a mystic, you know. But anyways, so the evolutionary perspective, we have adaptation, the creatures adapting to what it finds in order to survive. I think Darwin wrote this essay where he saw these two different types of birds on an island, and these birds that had migrated to this island, and these birds were at first fighting for food, but one of the birds had a pointy beak and one of the birds had a sort of kind of like a parrot beak, you know. And so these two birds, based on what they had, they adapted to the sort of, let's say, living routine based on what they had, right? So the birds with the sharp pointy beak, they would eat worms, right? And the birds with, like, you know, parrot beaks would like break nuts or something. So pretty much how the journey of the past is influencing today the biological journey of the past. For example, jealousy. This might be something cool for people to know. It's like, we think jealousy has an evolutionary reason, you know. Or sometimes when we see a person's intense behavior, like, we could say that's an evolutionary thing. Or for example, women, when they look at kids, their hearts are way more softer than, let's say, for example, men who had to be hunter-gatherers back in the day, and the women were in the tribes, you know, protecting the children. It's as if there's an evolutionary training the species has gone to fill out its biological roles, you know. The socio-cultural, this one's super, you know, it's very easy to understand this perspective. It's pretty much society, which is, you can say, the laws that keep a collective game alive. We are not just born into a world, we are born into a world where there has been a sort of psychological blueprint placed before we entered it, right? It's not just, there was, think of it this way, the biological behavior of our ancestors led to certain conclusions on how to value the moment. And I see it as concentric circles, really. I see that, first there's a natural world, then there is, how would I say it? The sophistication of how members of the same species grouped together led to certain conclusions about reality which we all require to agree to. Similar to language, like when a person understands the alphabet of a language, then they get access to, let's say, being able to communicate that language, right? Or even when a person learns words from a language, what are they learning? They're learning perception, right? They're learning a new symbol for a perception, right? And what is perception? It is based on how the individual moved, how something moved at all, right? So think of it this way: if we had no idea of society and culture, it would just be the behavior of creatures on a rock and how sophisticated it got, right? Right now, to be a civilized human being doesn't mean the person has to just act physically in a certain way. You have to consider certain values, right? That means any human being who doesn't value the ability and the potentials of the human mind, it's very easy for them to become uncivilized, right? Because some part of them, think of it this way: what culture is group behavior, and what society is the structure for that group behavior. That means we think we have free will, but so many of our attitudes, it's like we're conditioned to such a degree. It's like a person wearing 7 jackets and thinking the 7th jacket is like their skin. It's like, no, so many layers of instantly accepted values for reality through unconscious development of the mind, right? That means it's like sometimes, here, I'll say it this way: when I was young, I was really shy, okay? And I wondered, why am I shy? And what shyness means is that the intelligence of the mind doesn't trust the world, right? I wondered about what had happened to me that I didn't trust the world enough to reveal who I was behind my eyes, And so somebody told me a story, but anyways, whatever it was, something in my psychology that made me either not trust myself or either not trust the world, which would lead to the same outcome, right? When you don't trust the space you're in, you can't move, right? But when you trust the moment, you can move, right? If I trust myself that I can move language in the space-time continuum, I can give a talk. But if I don't trust the movement of the energy that I am in the moment, it's as if I have not trusted a world to be a self in yet, right? And that's really important. I think the decency of human nature is making it hard for the children of the future generations to just accept that the world is an inefficient agenda, right? The world has seen its failure, it's in collective failure, but it has not yet seen its collective success, right? Imagine, like, suddenly this command from the center of all universes just was like broadcasted, right? And every person, imagine all the politicians in the United Nations, suddenly like a flash of light just appeared in the United Nations, and all of them had suddenly a memory, like imagine like a sort of memory entering their minds, and they realize that we can be so advanced that us fighting over that which isn't advanced is like not our real life. The real life of a species in the void is to seek out advancement in all its dimensions. This is the teaching of the greater dimensions. Why? Because the greater dimensions are considering themselves so great that incapability is not even an option. It's like man fears God, but does God fear man? So it's another way of saying those who are less advanced may fear the advanced, but those who are advanced, do they fear? Do they fear anything? Can they even fear anything? Right? So these perspectives are key. It's just approaches, guys. Pretty much what human beings have done. They're like, yo, look, life is happening. What do you do about it? I'm going to walk towards the Mystic's Valley and try to pilot this episode a bit through a metaphysical context. To be a philosopher, let's say, is to be someone who is not convinced by an answer to reality. There's this idea that answers close a world, and this idea that questions open worlds. When we look at human behavior, let's say it has a physical consequence, right? We're only considering it in the outer realm dimension. But if we were to wonder, what does the inner realm dimension cost? Right now, we have built a civilization where it's okay for people to dishonestly attain, right? That means, what was it? I think it was, I was seeing this video where pretty much rappers were communicating about being tough, right? Like being dangerous, right? And it's not that I'm saying a person shouldn't be dangerous, but it's as if there is a time and place for how we release the energy we're being into the world that is going forth. A philosopher which wonders or questions reality, or let me just say it this way, just a human being that wonders about, okay, what is this world I'm in, right? Our analysis of it depends on how many dimensions we see in reality. Something that I notice happened to me is that I pretty much had this profound experience where, let's say 1/4 in my life, I was like, yo, I have no idea what this is that is looking out through my eyes. It can't be my body because my body is changing and a consciousness is still noticing the body, right? From a sort of attributeless view. Right? It's as if I know my body's growing. How can I know my body's growing if the body's becoming different? Right? So I'm noticing like there's a biological change, as if I'm this presence of attention that is being the moment, the whole moment, and what's changing in it is a biological body. Okay? I also notice that the ideas I have of myself, like if somebody comes and tells me, who are you, man? In that moment in my inner realms, I have so many options to answer. I could say who I was. I could identify based on who I was yesterday. I can identify based on who I think I am now. I can identify based on who I think I will be. Somebody says, who are you, man? I'll be like, if I give an answer from a past, I'll be just like a, simple evolutionary creature trying to max out the recent acquisition of language as a species. In contrast, recent acquisition in contrast to how long the universe is, right? People don't realize, I think it was like, people thought it was like 5,000 years ago where writing is like a 5,000-year-old technology. The use of language See, that's the thing, right? Language cannot replace all the dimensions of the individual. If somebody does something and we're like, yo, this person is a bad person, only in that moment we have the proof that they are a bad person if they do something which the whole group has accepted that means bad, right? But I'm trying to say that the human being is this growing intelligence in the realm, and its relationship with reality is where it finds itself and what it accepts about their mind, right? A lot of people, there's some people in the esoteric community seeking power, and like it kind of upsets me. Let me tell you why, right? It's like the person wants to levitate, the person wants to, have telekinesis or something, you know? Like the person is seeking power, but the person doesn't realize that energy is everywhere. It's just what sort of antenna you become, what sort of self-acceptance of world you have. That's where power comes from. You see, there is a power, let's say the biological power, like how much food you ate, how much sleep you've had, how much energy you've had, right? What I've noticed personally in my life and in this journey of giving these talks is that I've noticed that when I come to give a talk, there is a different experience of my own energy, right? It's like I strangely feel it's not my body's energy that is being used, it's my approach to reality being way more than my body, where the energy is arising from, right? So what I'm trying to say is that how you see yourself directly is simultaneously being how you're seeing the world indirectly. Now, if a person takes their consciousness to the context of life, like people conceptually try to find happiness, and that's kind of impossible because the concepts and the state of mind changes all the time. But if somebody realizes happiness is in the context of reality, you see, this is what the Buddha realized. The Buddha realized happiness is a possibility within the context of everything, which is another way of saying you can't be sad in a happy world. Or the Buddha was, in the Lotus Sutra at least, it depicts it this way, where the Buddha at the end of his life realized that you can't get enlightened in an enlightened world. The enlightenment is already there. It's just that the attention in the moment, through the effort and the intentions that, like arrows are sent forth through the free will, your attention to reality is the engagement of all your previous energy with a type of energy, right? I don't know how to say it. It's like sometimes in these talks I find myself, using the word eternity. And I wonder about how has what sort of inner experience is that creating for me. Imagine somebody saying, like once in these talks I said, imagine civilization got a pancake flip psychologically, and instead of thinking we're temporary beings, everybody thought for a moment we're immortal or eternal beings. Like, what would the psychology of an immortal person be? And the idea is that where the attention goes, the feelings arise from. Something I've had a privilege, I'm noticing now, to be honest, something I've had a privilege in all these talks I've given is a sort of internal cinematic experience where emotions have arisen based on what I have seen in my inner realms. So it's really like a person can have different attitudes. I think the inner realms can be used in so many ways, right? And based on as many ways as human beings are being born. In my inner realms, there's been moments where I have felt like the whole moment is like a spotlight, and everything's kind of past, the consciousness is a spotlight, and everything is passing through it. And sometimes when I give these talks, I feel like, imagine somebody putting their hand in a river, right? It's like the river passes through their hand doesn't go by the river, but they get to feel and experience the river, right? Or imagine at night, me and my cousins, when I was really young, we would go to this cottage my family had in Iran, and there was a river by there, and we would get flashlights at night, and we would go and by the river to check out the river. It was me, my brother, and my cousins, and we would point the flashlight at the river at night, and it was as if it was such a like incredible visual scenario, right, where everything is dark, you can't see anything, but the moment the flashlight goes on the river, it's like in the darkness there's some incredible movement of the water, right? So sometimes when I speak, I'm saying it's like I'm not moving, the world is moving through me, but moments where I want to move in my inner realms, I usually translate my sense of self. That means I make my personality into a geometrical shape. Then as a geometrical shape, what's the term? I shift through various inner realities, and nothing happens, because anything happens in those inner realms, it's happening to a geometric shape. It's not happening to who I am as a person, right? That means it's a sort of way where the person travels through their inner realms, through their mind, but they travel geometrically, not as a personality, right? I've experienced this. This is like, I could be just, I think we all have a geometrical way we can move behind our eyes, but, so far my experience points to this. So it's like I'm saying, okay, to attempt to solve this problem of, okay, what is the value of our eyes? What is the value of consciousness to a world? Now, in regards to a context of nature and nurture, right, those 7 major psychological perspectives apply. But if a person wanted to think of it this way, if anybody wants to be completely honest, 100% honest, they would come to the conclusion that there is more unknown than known in reality. So a person saying I don't know is way more honest than a person saying I know. This is something that the ancient Greeks realized. This is why Socrates said the only wisdom or the only true knowledge is to know that you know nothing. That means this is, I think, what most teachers are waiting for in the educational system. They're waiting for the student to say, I don't know. And then the teacher's like, I got the kid's attention, let me teach. Think of it this way, to take this more towards the title. Let's say that somebody goes up, let's say person A goes to person B and says, hey person B, what are you living for? And person B, or let's say one human being goes to another human being, asks that human being, what are you living for? And the human being's like, first I'm living for myself, then I'm living for my children, I'm living for my family, then I'm living, for my society, nation, and whatnot. I'm living for my nation, I'm living, for my, let's say even the person is humanitarian, they care for the environment. So let's say the person's like, yo, I'm living for my planet, right? What I'm trying to say is, how far is the human being seeing? And what sort of shift to a context of reality are the future generations going to experience? If we care just for what's immediately in front of us, that is not that is too simple. It's too simple to just take the world as what we see it. Sensory perception is remarkable because it gives us access to reality, but sensory perception feels it has an edge, like we're inside a box. you know. This might be an incredible way to say it. Sometimes, mystically speaking, I have felt reality is like a container. You know, as much as I can close my eyes and see the world. That's like me my attention, my consciousness containing the world. But when I look at the world in the outer realms, it's like this. It's like in front of my eyes, the world is holding me. Behind my eyes, I am holding the world. But what that I is doesn't seem to be defined by either the world or its fragmentation. You know? There's a poet named Rumi. He gives this metaphor where he says truth is like a mirror, and imagine a mirror being shattered. Okay, like a shattered mirror. And Rumi, is this poet from 700 years ago, is saying every shattered piece of the mirror reflects the truth, right? So it's as if what the truth of nature is that which is aware of its reflection in either one mirror or in shattered mirrors, you know, like in pieces of the mirror. Analysis, cognition, that's really we're turning the world into pieces to then put it back again, you know. It's like, imagine we take a picture of reality, we take a photo of our moment, we turn that into a puzzle, and then we break all the puzzle pieces and we're trying to put the picture back, right? That's really what the approach the educational system has taken. The educational system of today is possessed by the economy. It's not even real educational systems, right? They're all acting, right? It's like we haven't realized language is thin ice, right? Language is just as a temporary acceptance of reality through side symbolism, you know, a symbolism in a subtler state of our attention. You know, I'm going to bring back something about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, actually. And there's something I want to say in regards to a mystical context. I have noticed something, that this hierarchy of Maslow, it's a system and approach in the outer realms, right? So I'm going to give you an example. Imagine there's a person who has none of these. They don't have their psychological needs, physiological needs met. They don't have their safety needs met. They don't have their love and belonging met. They don't have their, let's say, esteem, the value of their sense of self, you know. They don't have that, and imagine they don't even have self-actualization. So imagine somebody is actually being nothing in the outer realms. Now imagine this person sees a movie of a person who reaches self-actualization. And this person can close his eyes and imagine the same journey of the movie character for itself. So in our inner realms, we can actually instantly climb this mountain, right? What I'm trying to say is that I can close my eyes and imagine I'm Superman. In the outer realms, I'm not Superman, but in the inner realms, I can envision myself flying and, you know, tap dancing and there being earthquakes, you know. Can you imagine Superman taking tap dancing classes and the government's like, yo man, there's too many earthquakes, we're destroying human infrastructure, Superman. Go find another hobby, you know? In the inner realms, we have access to instantaneous reality, but the emotions we receive from those realities are different. A hungry person can visualize eating food, but it doesn't in the outer realms, it doesn't satisfy, like the person's still hungry, you know? Like imagine somebody's hungry and they could try to visualize like a moment in their memory where they had ate a lot of food and they were just resting afterwards. So like the person can feel like they're full, but the stomach is empty. You know, in the inner realms, right, the hunger is satisfied instantly, but in the outer realms, the hunger is there. Everybody is living two lives in one moment, you know, and even I imagine even more than that, but for me right now, to my own psychology, I'm considering 4 dimensions, right? 4 ways that my moment can have a value to me. Contextual value. The context of the moment could be void. That means imagine the purpose of the world and reality is nothing, like actually nothing. Right? I could look at reality and be like, okay, there's no value in the moment. The mind has an ability to see no value in the moment. Somebody could put, let's say, $1 million in front of the person, and if the person doesn't even value money, right? Imagine putting $1 million in front of like an Amazonian tribesman, right? And the person just like, you know, uses the money to build a blanket or something, you know? Right? They don't see a value, right? They don't see, it's like the moment can be empty, right? This is an important 1/4 of the mystical experience. It requires an acknowledgement of emptiness. I can look at this life and be like, it's all one universal being. There's been many times I've thought, am I like the red blood cell to a, you know, cosmic entity? Like, what does it mean to be a human being? You know, could hilariously highways be like veins of like a universal being, of a cosmic being? So for me, I have wondered, could the whole moment be one cosmic organism? Could we be inside a universal being right now? Right? I think religious people indirectly act as if they are, right? And what religion means, Swami Krishnananda, I think he's given one of the best definitions. He says religion is God remembering himself. The religious person is trying to act so pure that the only thing that moves through the person is the divine will, right? This is really where non-duality plus devotion leads. This is Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is another way of saying you are loving yourself, world, and the only thing left is to love is God, right? Right now we're living at a time where the species doesn't even love its own future. You know, it's like people are living as if tomorrow doesn't matter to them, but tomorrow is based on us, you know. We have around 30 years before 2050 to advance human communication before a technological revolution makes us more and more not want to be natural beings. So it's as if, think of it this way, the human mind has an ability to express a sort of advanced ability to communicate. And in the future, if we become technological entities, it's all about the speed of communication. Right now, if I could instantly teleport my ideas to the minds of the viewers, right, Like, teleport not just the words I'm saying, but just teleport the inner experience I had. There would be no way, no need for me to communicate. Right now, the only reason human beings have to communicate is because their minds are separate. You know, when we go into nature, you do find a collective mind. But when you are in civilization, the whole point of civilization is how advanced, what's the potential of our individualism. You know, I just thought that a good term for what kind of person I am, or what sort of archetype I entertain when I give these talks, it's like a reality researcher. You know, imagine somebody researching the ultimate reality, somebody wondering about what is the most advanced state of being, or what is the most advanced way that 8 billion creatures in the void could behave. And to me, the conclusion, the summit of the mountain that I climbed to and found was the advanced civilization. For me, the advanced civilization, you know, I mean, I don't have kids. If I have kids, my children will be the most beautiful and most advanced thing of my life, you know. My wife, my children. But then if somebody says, what do you love the most after your family? Let's say after all of your family, you know, I would say it's the advancement of civilization. If in some sense, let's say, omnipresent voice just asked me, why are you still existing in this realm if you've noticed beyond it, right? It would be just to see how an advanced civilization begins to happen. We're living at such a hilarious time where people, I'll say it, I think the species has low self-esteem, the whole species. You know, our collective result as a species is, I'm saying it's like the species doesn't have confidence in itself, but the future is waiting for us to advance civilization. Right? It's as if we have one lifetime to see what the most advanced strategy for organisms is. Right? We have one lifetime to see how advanced we can be. Now, let's say a person wonders, what is the most advanced state? Now, in an advanced civilization, it's not going to be kind of like protect the human idea like a, you know, the intensity of reality is going to become multidimensional in the way where a psychologist in the year, I don't know, let's say 1,000 years in the future or something, the psychologist would be compartmentalizing behavior in the lens of a dehumanized spectrum and a humanized spectrum. So advanced intelligence does not necessarily mean it has to remain human till the end of time, right? The more we go into the future, the more ways we are experiencing beyond the limits of the human body. If somebody says, what is the greatest treasure you have found in the world? In the outer realms, it is the advanced civilization. In the inner realms, it's just the remembrance of origin. It's as if the purpose of our minds is returned to its original state. The purpose of our bodies is to, in some sense, build the most advanced reality. You know, a person can have this line of thinking, you know, go look at it this way, where they're like, okay, if right now I was to cook, if I was to cook like a meal, right? There is 100% people like Chef Ramsay and so many different chefs on the planet that they could cook that food better than me. So With this same line of thinking, I think about, okay, there's a way our species is living. There are ways that human beings are implementing and applying their intelligence to their reality. But what if there could be, in some sense, a greater way how this whole system of human civilization can happen? What if there can be another way? You see, it's as if a person has to build up, has to engineer towards hope, right? What I mean by this is that the person can't, let's say somebody can't do something and they're like, okay, I can't do this, so let me see what is in some sense the first approach to doing this. Okay, let me just let me just put the idea of the advanced civilization. Let's say you're a human being on this planet and you're like, okay, let's say if we wanted to build an advanced civilization, what would the first thing, like how would we go about doing that? Right? So the person would think, okay, let's say before we start with building an advanced civilization, let's first think about what is the most advanced human being. Right? So we make the problem smaller by trying to solve one part of it rather than all of it at once. So then we try to solve the problem, okay, what is the most advanced way to be a human being? Then we see we still don't have the answer, so we have to again, deduce it. So the person would be like, okay, before we see what the most advanced human being is, let's first see what the human being is, or what does the concept of advancement mean? And that's exactly where my attention is right now. I feel like a human being who asks the question, where is history going, and realize it's based on the unknown potential within our eyes. So the administration of the future requires an incredible multidimensional tolerance. Right now, any person, let's say where there's any sort of, let's say, discriminatory ism, right? Like racism, sexism, all the sorts of isms similar to those, right? All of these are happening because the individual entity has an incapability of being tolerant for other possible angles to the same reality, to the same moment. That means it's an intolerance to look at the moment in multiple ways, which is leading to war, right? Like, something I really expected the United Nations to do when, Russia and Ukraine went to war, right? Or something like any continent. Like, I thought it's like all the nations have to treat it like a classroom, okay? Think of all the nations, the leaders of nations being like kids in a classroom, and two kids in a classroom have fought, right? And all the kids in the classroom would be like, okay, it's like two people in front of us are fighting like savage animals, right? Like, how would I say this? Like, for example, Russia and Ukraine being at war right now, it's like two kids in the classroom beating the shit out of each other, right? And it's becoming savage and it's having human casualties. So all the kids in the classroom are going to be like, WTF, and they separate them. Right? They separate the two, or they make the two nations spend as long as time it takes to find a solution. Right? That means that this is the thing, that what war is the person's like, okay, screw it, I'm just gonna agree to the view I have now and just go forth with it. Right? But what if there's so many other ways, right? What if we can shift the identification system of nations? Right? Or the abstraction that we have so firmly accepted as reality. What if in the void there was an infinite opportunity to change? The destiny of the human species is towards seeking the perfection of the group mind. So what does this mean? There was this scholar, I forget his name, I think it was Wittgenstein, Ludwig Wittgenstein. He had, I don't remember the exact quote, but he was saying something like, let me see if I can find it. Guys, I'm just scrolling through Ludwig Wittgenstein quotes to find that quote I wanted to talk about. Okay, I can't find the quote, but there's so many epic Wittgenstein quotes I'm seeing where I think I might go into a quote tunnel. Hang on, guys. Okay, here. Ludwig Wittgenstein. So guys, I'm just going to read a bunch of quotes. Ludwig Wittgenstein is a German philosopher, and he wrote this next level book called Tartarus. People don't realize how incredible philosophers are. Why? Because philosophers were human beings that were noticing that there is a spectrum of perception, that in our inner lives, our attitude is based on a value. You know, that value comes from how our attention is opened up to the world. Ludwig Wittgenstein says the human body is the best picture of the human soul. Wittgenstein says the real question of life after death isn't whether or not it exists, but even if it does, what problem this really solves. Ludwig Wittgenstein says a serious and good philosophical work could be written consisting entirely of jokes. Yeah, I mean, a person could be like, you know, why did the chicken cross the black hole's event horizon? You know? Or what is that view where they say, why did the chicken cross the road to get to the other side? But the other side could mean heaven, you know? You know, it's language has color. You know? That means it's like not only do what we find as imagination to have geometrical shape, be made of some sort of shape, but it's like a substance can be visualized, you know? Like, how incredible is the mind? Like, we don't have x-ray vision, but we could look at a like an object. Like right now I'm looking at this coffee cup in front of me. I could look at this object and just visualize how it's all just, atoms and made up of molecules and particles. I could see this whole cup turn into geometry in an instant, and it's not X-ray vision, but it's a way the mind observes the physical and inputs non-physical value. Our minds are putting something in every moment that means anything to us. Our mind is, if somebody says, Mr. Within, what is the mind? I will tell you, your mind is a force. When you become honest with this force, you realize it's unknown. When you're in the unknown, you're left in the moment as your simplest self. Your simplest self is as if before the free will has a preference, what is just being in the moment, right? People think meditation means you gotta go to a mountain and sit in a cave. It's like, it's all about your relationship with the world you're experiencing, right? So it's the nature. It's like there's questions about who is experiencing life, and there are questions about what is life that is being experienced. For now, life is like being a creature on a rock in the middle of a nowhere, and how these creatures reacted to emptiness by creating language simulations and story simulations to live artificial lives in a truth that's incomprehensible. Our species is in a theater of language. It's like literally we freaked out because it was too big to make sense, too vast. The cosmic event is too big, right? Like what? It's not just like how are we happening as creatures in the world. It's like how is the world happening, right? How's the universe just being here, Who knows, in the future, a child might be born and the child will be, a universe whisperer. The child will ask the universe, why are you here? And an answer will come. To build an advanced civilization is to build a system where the most advanced potential of an intelligent being is not just authorized, innately authorized, but it's as if it's like the vision of greatness. There's a snapshot photo. That photo, I'm saying, let it be the advanced civilization. But if you think about just how far consciousness will journey, like something that honestly I think when I'm gonna, like if there comes a moment where I'm transitioning out of this reality, I have to walk beyond my eyes. I will smile knowing that regardless of what happens to my individual existence, the collective species of the existence is here. That means the person closes their eyes knowing the greatness of the world, the potential of the world is still alive. The victory of the wise is they enter victorious rooms, and it's not an ideological victory, right? There's some states of mind that feel a sort of victory, like samadhi. Like I experienced the state of mind. How would I say it? I just sat down and I experienced the moment where I could not do anything to my moment. That's the level of being I experienced. It was like total powerlessness when it came to the free will trying to change the context that a world is here. And that's when I would say I noticed, like, since the beginning of my life, I have been a silent viewer behind my eyes. The language is being used. Imagine somebody, using a remote controller, and that remote control car is moving. Now imagine the remote control car becoming conscious and being like, what's moving me, and thinking it's moving itself, not realizing the intentions that journey through our free will into these outer realms. They are, it's as if there is a hidden life. But this hidden life is similar to how the roots of the tree are hidden in the soil, but when you push the soil aside, when the semi-artificial goes aside, only truth is left. Right? So the person's search for truth becomes a resolve of a new resolution on their own nature of being, in accordance to how life is even present for you. You know, it's like they call it the present because to be alive is a unique geometrical gift. The cosmos was like, okay, this creature is going to have a shape, and it's going to have the free will to shape itself, right? It's a geometrical blessing to be a creature in the world, believe it or not. Like the amount the 10 consciousnesses can play with geometry, it's like it's an infinite haven, you know, it's like a heaven. You know, for the mind, like it's hilarious. Our minds are acting like they're in heaven. Right? But the body the body is on earth, and when the earth it loses its connection with the heavens, it's as if the ignorance of hell is considered. Right? So it's man's connection with the truth of what the moment's nature. You're not wondering about just how is a human being on a planet. You're wondering about how is my mind being my whole moment of consciousness, and how have I not noticed that the movements of my mind are not physical, but they're visible. Our inner life is the greatest proof, right? Like people don't realize mysticism is the most incredible idea, the most incredible attitude a person can have to reality. The most incredible approach, you know, it's like the most incredible perspective. Why? Because it is not ignoring the unknown. All ideological systems are acting like they know what everything is. People are trying to connect to a universal archetype, right? But the only way you connect to it is realizing before you were an individual, what was the whole moment being, right? It's like the mystery goes beyond the idea of a past life. Why? Because the mind is like a non-objective, spherical moment of view, you know? So the question comes down to, okay, I am alive for one lifetime. You know, there's a socio-cultural you know, road to go on, but at the same time, what is the mystery of how my eyes are open? It's another way of saying people stop thinking in life as if does the self have worth or is the self worthless, and rather wonder about, okay, I have access to a geometrical position in the space-time continuum. What can I do with from my position, right? You know, I have this view that the soul of everybody is like their general. You know, if you're religious, you could make God the emperor in which the general is living for, right? It's as if our bodies are living for ourselves, our minds are living for the world, and our soul is living for God, right? Living for the ultimate source or the unknown source. We must have an incredible multidimensional tolerance and multidimensional playfulness. We have to have, as a species, a capability to look at every human being and every creature that is alive and be like, okay, what if there are unknown hidden values to this creature, right? What if there's unknown ways that a person's mind is happening and no impression in the outer realms cannot be enough, right? There's this idea where they say don't judge a book by its cover. Little did we know that's the destiny of an advancing mind, right? Because the more advanced you are, it's like the more dimensions you see, anything you see, that concept can be found in those dimensions, you know. What are we living for? Well, and that leads to the value of our eyes. I have just considered, to make it easy for myself, is that I am living for the most advanced victory of the human species. That means the most genius way that 8 billion creatures entered the future. It's as if the purpose of the dimensions of life is to shape questions for the unknown witness to know again, to become the answer. Our life force, we're not just a physical entity, we are a force. We are like the invisible awareness of a visible force. The body is right now a force. I could choose to just identify the moment's intelligence with my name, but it's like the name is just how my attention is held in the moment. What the nature of the attention is a realization that your personality is being watched. Just like the idea of God is an inconceivable witness, right? The soul is inconceivably witnessing its collective mind's individuation as a body, right? So I'm saying, okay, the species has to choose a level of might and strength. Literally, it's like an archer, right? In any person, and like this is how I've experienced any moment that I'm living where I need to have energy before I move. Like an archer, I need to have an aim, and then you let go of the arrow, and it's as if you attain a perspective. You find a single pointed position, a vision, and then you let go of the arrow. And the moment when, the archer lets go of the arrow, it means pre-calculation of strategy. It's just trust in action. That means to be an advanced being on earth, the signs, if somebody was like, how do I know somebody's advanced, is how much they trust all the dimensions of their being, not just one dimension of their being. A story is just one dimension of reality. When the story can change, we say, okay, parallel universes can exist. Somebody was like, oh my God, reality is just one story. What if we had multiple stories happening at the same time, right? Imagine you went to a cinema and you saw 4 films being played at the same time. How can we trust the known through our visible life? And how can we trust the unknown as the context, our invisible life? That means, what does a creature in a world do when that creature realizes everything is unknown? The creature has to begin cultivating contentment with their honest vision, with their honest view on reality. The person has to, it's as if, think of it this way, the moment any human being, any creature in any part of the universe, right, a planet similar to Earth and whatnot, when they reach a point when the idea of advancement has meaning to them, poetically, the moment the idea of advancement exists for you, the spirit of advancement is found. Right, what a spirit is what geometrical collection was authorized by what sort of force. Right, there's multiple forces at work. Right now there's a biological force that's leading to this, me giving these talks, right? There's at the same time a psychological force, right? And in both the dimensions, in front of my eyes, in my outer realms, it's an unknown world, and a known world, an unknown self and a known self. And behind my eyes, there is an unknown world and an unknown self, right? And a known world and an unknown. So what that means is there's certain contents of my mind. Let's say if the mind was how another world was simultaneously happening in our world, right? It's as if there's been moments where I have lived throughout the day more as in my inner realms, right? And there's been let's say days where I just purely lived in the outer realms. You know, usually divinity is how the mystery of the mind. It's like the body is found in a simple state, and the mind is being thought to be this complex thing that's happening. But when that complexity becomes simple to itself, a new type of unknown complexity is found. The evolution of hope is the concept of advancement. Wittgenstein says, if we spoke a different language, we would perceive a somewhat different world. Wittgenstein says the problems are solved not by giving new information, but by arranging what we have known since long. Wittgenstein says not how the world is, but that it is the mystery. This whole time, dear viewers, there has been an inner realm dimension to everybody. A person can choose to live more in their inner realms. In their outer realms, they appear less cultivated, but it's like the person has more comfort with how their conscious attention moves rather than what their conscious attention acts as, you know? You know, I'm that human being in history making the bold claim that all ideological systems will lead towards the advanced civilization. To find the purpose of the body, it's very easy. You know, the body has its own behaviors. But when it comes to what is the purpose of 8 billion human minds, that purpose belongs to how we want to approach the future. Like I'm probably in the future gonna give an episode just called maybe The Future, you know? It's like, what was Mr.Within talking about? The future, you know? And what is the future? It is the most advanced potential of how our past can be restructured as a strategy, you know? It's like, what I really want is the human species, every human being, to wonder about the most advanced strategy and to consider that the most advanced strategy is not devoid of all dimensions of reality. The most advanced being is not a being that in one dimension is advanced, you know, but a being who in all dimensions of accessible reality they are advanced. You know, that means people have to start cultivating multidimensionality. You know, this multidimensionality is going to be a great guardian spirit, poetically, you know, of how our species learns to acknowledge other worlds. You know, living in Canada has been a very unique experience, especially if you're someone interested in psychology. I'll actually make this, I think Canada is going to, I don't know, I mean, this could be my emotions talking, but like, I sometimes think, when will Canada be advanced? Imagine in the future, all skyscrapers have like this glass like shield or dome around them, right? Imagine we could control the air conditioning of a city. These too far-fetched expectations from a nation, but really what I'm trying to say is the most advanced decision. The species has to wonder about the most advanced, I'm that guy capitalizing his career on the concept of advancement. Out of all ideas on this planet, I have wondered which is the most alive. You see, think of it this way. To be alive is a value. It's an energetic value. To be a conscious human being is how we can convert our energetic existential value into a psychological direction or destination or purpose or ambition. What the future is how deeply the creature cared for what it was. The greatness of the species is dependent on how advanced human beings are. Think of it this way. One way to build an advanced civilization would be to just teleport it instantly here. But another way to build an advanced civilization is to have all the members, all the human beings that constitute lead to the activity of the human civilization. It's like, think of it this way, a human being has one heartbeat, but an advanced civilization has as many heartbeats. Like the heartbeat of an advanced civilization is all the advanced members of it. Every ideological system, this is pretty much Mr. Within's command to the universal sector, that everything should now assist humanity with its most advanced step. That means if there is angels, if there is God's grace, if there is extraterrestrial compassion, enlightened extraterrestrials or whatever, right? It's as if you reach a certain point where the human species is deciding, just because it cares for the future, right, is deciding to step forth, not one step ahead, not adorably 2 steps ahead, but as far steps as it can envision in the future. You have to find the greatness of your future in your inner realms, and then your whole life becomes powered by your clearest vision of unreality. It's like, how can a human being care for the world when it chooses to completely care for itself and realize the purpose of? It's as if individuals are serving their own collective kingdom, right? People are going to be like, Mr. Within, it's so old school when you say the kingdom of humanity, but I'll tell you, kingdoms were spaces, right, where the value of the space was being held in the highest regard. In civilizations where there were kings, there were children growing. They didn't have Superman comic books, right? The children back in the day, they were born in a kingdom and they knew there was a king, and every person, their behavior in the environment was readjusted in accordance to the value of the most important person in the environment, right? So think of it this way, kings were like miniature sons on the psychological level to the people in their kingdom, It's like, what is a kingly mind? A kingly mind is another way of saying the king is the kingdom. So it's like when a king has an ego, the nation's like, all right, Really, to me, I don't understand why politicians, there's so many political debates on TV, but I don't understand why politicians don't speak about truly their vision of a future. Imagine a politician will come and they will speak about 1,000 years in the future what their vision is, even though they have a short term, but what sort of potential reality. Imagine there was a way a nation could archive or have a sort of copy pasted simulation of like an archive of all the attitudes of all people moving a collective system, right? What we need is to kind of like how somebody learns, like imagine this kid back in the day, his father was a warrior that died in battle. And so this kid realized that it was like, he decided to master the sword. And imagine this kid going into the forest at the end of the day or in the afternoon, right? And in some sense getting a sword and just practicing hitting the trees, right? This is back in the day where life had a savageness where it doesn't have now. So imagine this kid is training every day. He goes on, and what is training? Training is another way of saying you're cultivating dimensions. Strangely, me giving all these talks, sometimes I think, what is my karma training me for? But just this idea of the king being the kingdom in the future, if individual human beings choose to have a collective psychological experience, that will be a time in human history where the technology of the biological body for the first time has lesser value than the potential of experience we can receive from a, let's say, cyber technological reality, right? Like right now, philosophers in 2022, they're all looking in futurists and philosophers, right? Futurists and philosophers should be poetically treated as like the holy men of a secular society. They're the ones who care for where the value of a moment goes, right? It's not like we just have things. It's that us having reality is leading to a new reality. Really, compassion doesn't arise unless the person realizes how advanced and unknown the human mind is. That means imagine how did violence stop on Earth? Because human beings were like, yo, let's figure out what we are before we destroy it in ignorance. Let's figure out what is the essential value of the system, and what do we do with the humility of realizing we are a small event of nature in a giant event of nature. We are on the shoulder of a giant universe that is moving in ways that our technology can't access. We can't index the whole cosmos. This whole model that we gotta, in some sense, the measurement is a simulation of value. It's not the actual value. And I'm not talking about it in regards to mathematics, because it's like the philosophy behind numerology is like the contextual shape of value. People don't realize we had to have as a species a mathematical awareness before we could even notice there was more than one word in a sentence. There's a mathematical understanding, right? It's like a mathematical condition had to be met, a mathematical realization prior to a linguistic realization. Alright, let me find a different song. Where can the moment go? We breathe in the unknown. That is the responsibility of the psychology of the future. They're going to care for the unknown. We are right now fearing the unknown. We think extinction is the destiny of the human being, not realizing it. Why has nature, nature is like, I have for 4.5 billion years sculpted you, and you think it's like you're gonna die soon. It's like your species is destined for the cosmos to remember itself. There will come a time in my strategy of civilization 2.0, I have seen that 3,600 years from now, we will have an opportunity to advance beyond the language threshold and no longer be a conceptual entity. That means the context, the conceptual entity the concept was experiencing itself in dissolves into the context, and when it becomes the context, it can infinitely conceptualize. That means, hilariously, only when you can be nothing, you can simultaneously be infinite. Zero and infinity are parallel to each other in the same way that singularity and duality are parallel to each other. Chaos and order were born in one moment, and the singular entered from the void, and behind the void there was an infinite potential for ways of the moment happening. We must not fear the unknown, because it is the revelation of our advancement. Could futurism be seen as a sort of religion? If we thought, can we turn the value, the fascination of the future into a religious principle? For me, I feel all ideological systems, religions included, not that they will be forgotten, but that all human beings will shift to a new model. And the new model would be that reality is how the unknown and known are simultaneously happening in one moment. So there's unknown variables and known variables, and our ability to analyze the moment is based on what variables we're aware of and how we have accurately perceived the value in those variables. Now, if somebody says, how do I accurately perceive the variable of an unknown, like an unknown variable? This is the remarkable thing, that the unknown has less to do with how something is and has more to do with who is watching the moment, right? So there's a level of mysticism that is automatically just in the states of silent realization. Why? Because the mind is allowing the body. It's like when your body trusts your mind, think of it this way, this is hilarious, but imagine a mind is a force, right? But it's an intelligent force. And so it's as if, like, let's say there's a playful mystic, like somebody who's a, deep viewer of reality, and this deep viewer of reality is playful simultaneously, right? So it's like the concept of playfully, gazing through, the edge of the world, The void exists because the idea exists. The singular, the dual, only in duality is there the possibility of psychological experience. That means to be conscious as a human being is like experiencing 1/4 of reality. But I think the superior realization of every system is that in whatever way the moment is divided, there's a realization that they're all present in one moment. So it's another way of saying, anytime a being trusts the world has an opportunity to trust them. So it's as if, like, who are we living for? What context are we living for? How far in the future can we see, and how far can we envision, our, let's say, grandchildren to the power of infinity looking back at us and being like, as if we noticed them. That's like a huge achievement. If the species realizes that there are people watching us from the future who haven't been born yet, if we have that attitude, it would be as if we are living not for just the greatness of the past. We're not living just for the greatness of the present, which has led to a sort of hedonistic freedom, right? but it's more like, if we incorporate the greatness of the future into our perspective or the way we look at things, we will discover a new energy source. It's as if, imagine there was an advanced human being, and this advanced human being lived the most advanced life, and let's say the most advanced civilization happened, you know. It's like when one man could do it, everyone could. To wonder about the unknown dimensions of life, or the unknown dimensions of an invisible place, the human species will realize that the future is where nature is going. We are like, what time is like a transcendental being running in an unknown world, and the trail it's leaving behind is time, and we are trying to follow eternity as temporary entities, you know. But really it's about a multidimensional tolerance. Why? Because the person suddenly sees that 8 billion heartbeats beat in different worlds behind us. Right? So when we realize that it's like, it's a more safer strategy to be like, okay, let's get the species comfortable with the unknown, so when they're comfortable with the unknown, they don't fear death, of how death is a way of entering the unknown. And in some sense, we try to see what we can do now, right? It's as if the future and the past are visions of the present. Think of it this way: a timeless being is using time to create a film for its body. The idea of advancement is the most beautiful idea. Why? Because somebody could be beautiful, but then there's advanced beauty. Right? It's as if you know, it's like the person has a view where it's like there's beauty on an individual dimension, but the beauty on a collective dimension is with what sort of synchronized trust in reality did a species, you know, advance into the future. Like, imagine every person that is alive and all knowledge, all the technologies that are not lost, they are not lost because we are still here. Right? And it's like, what are we? We are, to be alive is to be an ambassador of consciousness, you know. It's to be like an emissary of awareness, you know. We are like it's like those earth is heaven born. You know, there's this view. Sorry guys, I'm just changing the song. Okay. Could humanhood become a lost technology? What is found technology? And found technology is how human beings care to use something. And as long as we care to create a purpose for our biology, to create a purpose even for our natural psychology, right? It's as if those dimensions will be guarded, right? Who the advanced communicators are human beings who have an incredible capability to multidimensionally acknowledge life, so that in any situation of life they find themselves, they are not trying to solve the problem of one dimension, but they're trying to see how many dimensions are present before the solution is attempted, right? How many great strategies could be hidden, behind, let's say, the eyes of shy geniuses around the world. It's like how many Einsteins are, hiding in their inner realms, not realizing the purpose of the mind is all either to what can we do with our minds, right? We can either watch our mind. The person can just be still and watch the mind happen, right? The person can choose to have an emotional relationship with the content of their mind that comes, and when they have an emotional relationship, it's an instantaneous response. It's like wondering what is a person's attitude when they are reacting in an emergency, and it's based on who they are truly to themselves before that archetype was pushed into the unknown, right? If we ask ourselves, in what way is the personality being the body? It's like an instantaneous attention. The secret of reality seems to be that in an instant there is no need for anything to be anything. It's as if, what is freedom? Infinite potential. That's it. Because people realize there's a greater potential, the concept of freedom arises. The person's like, yo, I could be living in a better way. Why am I living in this way, right? Right? So it's world discovery. Freedom is when the world is getting bigger, right? And the person realizes there's different strategies to the moment. Now, how a person can stay motivated all the time, I mean, from a mystic's perspective, mystics are, you know what it is? Mystics are like important people who have realized important things, but the wisdom of like the ancient traditions was to not touch samsara, right? So like a yogi, let's say a bunch of yogis or mystics from Arunachala are hearing me give these talks, and their impression would be like, yo, this guy is swimming in karma. Like, it's like, look at the amount of language, right? So it's like, it's as if the more views you have on reality, if you believe in karma, the more karma you have. But when the person's mind wonders about how to resolve itself out of karma, it realizes it comes to a moment where it has to be honest enough to try to consider all dimensions of reality. That honesty leads to a point where it's like there's a dimension that is above a shelf our hands can't reach, right? And that is the nature of the unknown. So it's as if we're right now identifying as a known being, right? Through language, personality, history, memory, and everything we've got in common. I still feel there's so much more to say. But at the same time, what can I say? You know, there's the poetry to being a conscious entity. A person thinks they're alone and realizes all the forces in nature that keep them alone. It's like, how is the world being held? To wonder about the value of human eyes, like the value of our eyes, is to wonder about the value of truth. To wonder about the value of truth will eventually lead to who is setting the value for truth. And that will lead. But the question of, okay, what is moving the free will, or what is the free will a movement of? Right? That means our free will makes a decision, then personality is identified, right? But it's as if, what is the free will? What is moving the free will? I think this is a good question, because we're all, the greatest psychologists are all trying to wonder about the true nature of consciousness. We're living at a time where the species, the way it has defined consciousness, has made it impossible to understand. But in different worldviews, the world happens differently. So we're returning to the value of what is looking through our eyes, and I am saying I have tried to subjectively explain it, give it a definition. I've tried to objectively accept one definition, but all definitions for consciousness are changing, because consciousness is the spontaneous, instantaneous presence of sight in a reality that is moving. Right? That means where our psychologies actually start is like in the middle of nowhere, like in a dark room, suddenly somebody turned on a candle, right? Suddenly in a world that was already happening, the child opened its eyes. And who are we as people? Like, if we identify as our body, we're a physical entity. If we identify with our memories, we're a mental entity, right? If we suddenly notice in a non-dual present moment, like in a moment of peacefulness and stillness and silence, we're like, no way, the mind is experiencing everything happening at the same time. This is another way of saying why the idea of God is inconceivable. The moment goes forth. For how long will there be a humanized psychology to the human species? For how long is there going to be a biological physiology to the creature? And really, how are our desires moving us? Like, this is really it. A person wondering what is the ultimate psychological desire of a species. Like, what is the best thing we can even have as a species in the world? Like, what's the best thing we can do? For our minds is to find universal contentment. For our bodies, we're just like artists staring at a blank canvas. The purpose of physicalism is recreation. It's strange, but it's as if, like, it's like seasons are resurrecting, It's like the endless resurrection of the four seasons, Something very clear is that we cannot know an object because we are defining an object in accordance to its absence of movement from its context, which is the world. It's like, how do we know if what we see is how our mind is happening, or it's how the world is happening? Right? This has been the great question. It's like, why do I say Mr. Within? Because sensory perception is going within the organism, and then it's in some sense conscious. The ability of consciousness is to notice the information and respond to it. The purpose of consciousness seems to be an infinite behavioral freedom, which is another way of saying it seems to be that if our consciousness is identifying with our mind, the purpose of our mind is to turn the whole world into itself, and the purpose of the world is to turn us into itself. The great poetry of mind and matter, right? In Vedanta, they have the concept of Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is consciousness, Prakriti is matter. Purusha and Prakriti in Vedic thought are considered to be simultaneously arising. So it's like only when there is a body, there is a mind to it, and only when there is a mind, there is a body noticed. The idea of the body and mind it's like, poetically, you can treat the mind like your body in another dimension, or you could treat your body as a different type of mind. Do you know? It's all about what happened to free will's journey in the void. Like, this is mysticism. My question is, for how long will humanity be kept as something valuable, and for how long can we behave and stay human in a world where the psychological experience of people is wanting more. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like it's like a simulation is creating a hunger in our natural species to try to have the greatest unnatural experience, not realizing that cyberspace could be a forgetting of humanity. You know, so it could be that right now our being a biological being is more interesting than using a technology, but what if in the future using a technology becomes more interesting than being a biological being, right? This is like where realities of the future are being envisioned. Right now what the world needs is human beings to be so honest with how the past is present that they can envision the future's presence. We need people, we need futurists. Like, that's what the educational system needs to do, to create honorable futurists. Explorers of an unknown world, you know. In the future, the educational system is going to have an incredibly complex ranking system, you know. And everybody's going to be considered an explorer because everybody has access to a dimension of reality that hasn't been present before, right? We can look at human beings and just consider a biological objective value, but we can also look at them and be like, okay, the people are not just objects. What is the potential of the subject that is moving that object? And that potential of every person is dependent in how they have cared to love, to understand their eyes again, right? So it's as if the person's belief and philosophy is not tied down to an ideological system. They're like, let me look at the moment again, right? And it's another permission of novelty through a contextual reset. You know, in the future, if androids, imagine, like, you know, a technocracy doesn't, you know, turn us into spiritual machines, and let's say we experience the future where there's androids walking in the street, and the androids have such complex AI that it's leading to a personality, and they're politely acknowledging, like, the mystery of their own intelligence is like their soul. Right, so imagine an android and a human being and a clone. Let's say somebody who's a clone, it would be a sort of nanotechnology. Replication, so it would be, imagine an artificial clone of a person, an actual human being, and an android that's behaving like a person. Imagine they're all having a conversation. Where are the winds of evolution moving our attention? And what is the complexity that the species needs to acknowledge when it comes to simply function? The sky is the space where man's life extends to. When 8 billion human beings in the human species decide to build an advanced civilization, it's like the greatest moment was about to move. We must honor our humanity and not be afraid of what's beyond it. Thanks for listening, guys. Much blessings and namaste.